Hello, kia ora, I'm Philip Duncan. Thanks for joining us for our weekend weather update and the outlook for next week, recorded on Friday the 22nd of November. Let's have a look at the big picture map here showing air pressure and wind directions. So in the darker shading, that is lower air pressure, the brighter shading, high pressure, and that is an enormous high over the Tasman Sea, basically stretching all the way up to Vanuatu, all the way down almost to Antarctica. So that big system is the reason why we've just had those windier, colder southwesterlies blowing on this side of that high. And as the high rolls a little bit closer, not much closer though, it's pretty much parked there at the moment. As it moves a little bit closer, some areas in the north may notice those winds just tapering back a bit. But generally speaking, that high, that's where it's going to be parked for the weekend. And so the weather we've seen on Friday, likely to be carrying on this weekend. This is how we look at 1 o'clock Saturday afternoon. Pretty much how we look for Friday. We've got the high parked over the Tasman Sea and the southwesterly winds blowing through for most places. They might turn a little more southeasterly in some areas, a bit more southwest in others, but generally that is the flow coming into the country. But locally, you can always have a different wind direction, but that's the big picture there. So that's the reason why it is still a little bit colder in the south. And as that high just drifts a little bit closer over Southland and parts of Otago and the high country, that will kind of lock in the colder air you've just had. So frosts are possible this weekend. Please keep an eye on the frost maps and the free frost forecaster we've got in our app. Having a look at Sunday, not a great deal of change either. The high does move further out over to the eastern side as well, and that brings in a wee bit of convergence here. Could be a couple of afternoon heavy showers between about Wairoa and Gisborne. Anyone in there could be seeing some of those showers. Elsewhere, it is mainly dry, and if you live in Southland, where it has been cold, and will still be cold, especially on Sunday morning where you might have a frost. But I say might because at some point on Sunday, in comes this warmer airflow with the windier westerlies. So it's a bit borderline as to whether or not a frost will form, but there you go. It's a cold night. Some of you waking up to 0 or below 0 on Sunday before that warmer wind kicks in and then starts to lift your temperatures up. 958 is the air pressure in that storm down over the Southern Ocean. That's still a winter power, winter level storm still powering along just south of us. And that's the reason why the westerlies keep carrying on and why we're still getting these shots of cold air, these southwesterlies. Until those storms disappear, I think this is the weather pattern we're going into for December. And it means, as we see these forecasts showing westerly winds across the country, rain and showers, most likely on the western side, and the eastern side, driest and warmest. Perhaps that's a precursor to summer, because this is the weather pattern we've been seeing now for, about 7 months? And so if we start to see any sort of rapid changes now, it would be a little surprising. So I think we're quite likely to be going through December with this westerly pattern. You see it here on Monday, a little bit windy, just a little bit here and there, the usual wind in Cook Strait and Wellington, the west to northwesterlies pushing up temperatures along the east and the south. But of course, the western side sees cloud and a few showers, and again on Tuesday next week. So if you extrapolate, good serious word, out until January, and we were still getting this forecast, it would mean places like Auckland and New Plymouth and further down that whole western side might be a bit cloudier and a little bit windier and a little bit cooler, whereas those further to the east, drier, hotter. So that is the basic forecast if this pattern doesn't change anytime soon. We are seeing a little bit of life up in the tropics, but it's nothing like what you'd be expecting if we were going into a La Nina, which I don't think we're going to do now. So we are seeing some life up there, but not enough to be concerning us until this belt of high pressure to our north disappears. Whatever's going on in the tropics won't be affecting us, but you can certainly see the lean with those showers onto the western side of the country, and we are getting complaints from Southland. Hello, Bruce. Hopefully the drier weather is starting to be a bit more noticeable. It's going to still be mixed in with those storms in the Southern Ocean still coming up, bringing the lower half of the South Island sort of like, dipping it into the paint can and getting some of that colder airflow, the blue shading for you. But, generally we are seeing some larger dry spells coming on through. Now, as I cut to this map, which kind of says the opposite of what I just said, but that is still in the mix. We're still getting these cold fronts at least once or twice a week coming into the country. But hopefully the amount of rain that falls is getting lower and lower for those of you in the south. But look, the placement of this high south of Tasmania means once again scooping up that colder, windier southwesterly, just like we had this week, maybe happening again next week with another burst of briefly wintry weather in the south. Elsewhere to the north, not very much rain, and I know those of you in North Canterbury, some of you are basically in drought. Events like this don't bring in a huge amount of rain, but you still could get a few showers out of it. So let's take a look at your 7-day rainfall. Pale blue, it's at the start of the scale, not a lot of rain. So, and by the way, a lot of people complain about that, but the reason why is because blue is used twice. It's at the beginning and again at the end. We've clipped it off though because there is no dark blue, so we've clipped it off the key. And they use that globally because when you look at the planet, lots of areas have light rain falling in dry and drought areas, so they want to highlight that with blue shading, pale blue. And then at the other end, the extreme end, it's dark blue, sometimes black, sometimes white, are those colors that are used to show extreme rainfall. Red is in the middle usually, or slightly to the other end. So you do see some brighter orangey red shading areas, that sort of 50 or 60, not extreme, just kind of normal rainfall. Bit heavy maybe in the Tararua Range, some of the mountains here. But look at Southland, blue and greens. So 1, 5, 10, 15. That's over the next 7 days. Not a huge amount. I know you'd prefer it if it was 0 for a while. And look at the top of New Zealand, drier. The further north you go, the drier it gets. So that is the next 7 days rainfall. Now before I go, something a little bit different. Check out the storms across the Northern Hemisphere at the moment. Storm number 1 over here in the Northwest Pacific, affecting the northwestern United States. Very heavy rain coming into California. They've had hurricane force winds all the way up around Vancouver Island into British Columbia, Canada, and further northwards up into Alaska, where they've had damaging winds or hurricane force winds. Jump over to the eastern side and anywhere from the northeastern corner of Canada all the way down to about New York, even New Jersey. Here is the next storm. By the way, this is for Sunday lunchtime New Zealand time, or midnight Sunday if you're over in midnight Saturday going into Sunday morning here in England. And the UK and Ireland, look at this storm. 947, might go down to 940 or 930. Very low air pressure, severe damaging gales, hurricane force winds coming into a large portion of, pretty much most of the UK and Ireland. And then we're also seeing it going over into the continent as well. So severe winds, heavy rain, maybe some snow. 1, 2, 3 storms just on this map. There are storms around Japan, the eastern side of Russia, also in other areas around Europe. So a very, very busy time in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment as they go almost towards their start of winter. That's all from me. Thanks very much for joining me. Have a great weekend and we'll see you again on Monday.